Greetings sailors and welcome to Patreon Supporter Spotlight number 58. This was supposed to be done and dusted on like Saturday, but it's not been a good weekend unfortunately. On Saturday itself I just felt completely rotten from essentially lack of sleep. Ended up headachy and nauseous and not really in a fit state to do much of anything. And then yesterday, Sunday, I got the sad news that one of my uncles had passed away. So yeah, it really hasn't been a good weekend at all. So apologies if I sound a little less, you know, full of energy than usual. It's just been not the best last couple of days, let's put it that way. So to make up for it partially, I've actually put another replay on the end of this, so this is going to be quite a long one. We've got 3 supporter warships replays today, and we're starting off with this one in the High School Fleet Graf Spee with Fu Was Here. And it's actually not bad matchmaking. This isn't a ship that does all that well in, you know, completely bottom tier circumstances. But that's true for a lot of other tier 6 cruisers, of course. This, you know, regardless of what kind of matchmaking it gets into, it does have a heel, and therefore that makes it one of the more durable tier 6 cruisers to work with. But the downside of this is, well, I mean, it's an upside and a downside. You've got these 11-inch guns with battleship accuracy and German battleship accuracy, but when they hit, they can hit really very hard, especially when you manage citadels against other cruisers. And you can even citadel some same and lower tier battleships. You know, you get Congos to shoot at, for example. You're not going to have that much difficulty at reasonably close ranges penning with those guns. There is one further note I wanted to make, by the way, just at the top of this. I actually, as an experiment, I've recorded all 3 replays with OBS. Normally I use Bandicam, but this time around I've done a little bit of fiddling with OBS to, you know, change some of the local recording settings, and we're going to see how that works out. There was one of the replays in particular where I had to redo it multiple times, and I was scratching my head as to why it was not even giving me 30 FPS, and then I realised it was the replay itself, and I had to turn down a bunch of the settings. So I erroneously thought it was OBS that was giving me the trouble, and instead it was in fact the replay. That said, it's not like, just looking at the frame rates, it's not quite a full 30 FPS, and it should be. So if it dips just noticeably in 1 or 2 places, it will be because of OBS rather than as opposed to using Bandicam. But I'll be curious to see what the final processed quality on YouTube comes out looking like anyway. So far, Fu's just dodging madly. He's done some damage, he's managed a kill, but he's also receiving a little bit of focus at the moment, but nothing that is super scary. The Congo's guns could hurt, could definitely hurt, and you can see Fu is actually firing AP shells at this Congo because he's giving broadside. But the Congo's accuracy isn't that good. So unlike a Fuso or a Lyon where you're dodging a lot of shells, with the Congo that's not so much the case, and because they're 14-inch guns, you know, it's as opposed to, you know, a Bayern or a Koenig or something like that. Well, I have to say that I think the Koenig's actually like that. It's 12-inch guns on that thing. Anyway, it's not that big of a threat unless he gets unlucky, is what I'm going for in my typically long-winded fashion. And he is doing his best to wiggle and not give these enemy players an easy target. And that is kind of an important facet of learning to play cruisers, is trying to juke the enemy shots, trying to bait them into firing while you're, you know, heading one way and then turn the other at the point where the shots are in the air. And this is why, for cruisers particularly, the range of your guns is such an important characteristic, because more range means more reaction time essentially, and that, you know, just like an extra kilometre or 2 of range can make a huge amount of difference, because even just having an extra second or 2 of reaction time can be the difference between life and death. Now this is a slightly risky turn at this point. You can tell somebody's still aiming at him, but it's not the Congo, crucially. So, oh, there we go. Actually, it might have been the Congo with, was that okay, no, well, clearly I was not quite paying attention. I think I caught the flashes from the Congo secondaries and assumed that was the Congo's main batteries, but no. So yeah, it was a bit of a risky turn, but he's not taken too much more damage out of it. But at this point, the Congo definitely isn't aiming their guns this way, so he can start to come about a bit. And now he's got some allies that have turned up on this flank as well. Now on the other side, his team has just been able to go more or less straight up the 8, 9, 10 line and is now putting some pressure on the enemy cap. So this is, you know, a standard game. This is one of those games where we've had a bit of a carousel effect going on, and we'll see how his own team reacts and we'll see how the enemy team reacts, because sometimes you'll get everybody rushing back to their own respective bases and you kind of end up with round 2 of the exact same thing, except there's like half the ships left alive. So there goes that Congo. The Perth is now really quite isolated. And although the Perth can be a pretty strong ship, it does need some allies. If this Perth tries to smoke up at the moment, the only thing they're going to be able to do is run away. And versus an Arizona and Foo's guns, his life expectancy is probably not going to be that good. Yeah, it is essentially a Leander, so not exactly overly endowed in the armor department. And there we go, there's another kill. So 57k damage done. This is now a decent game, I would say. If you can manage kind of 50 to 60k damage done in a tier 6 cruiser, you're doing okay for yourself. And we've sped things up a little bit at this point because it's just Foo sailing into position. But the reason I've not jump cut this is so that you can see what the rest of his team's doing, what the enemy team's doing as well. I do tend to use jump cuts more than these kind of fast forward sections, but for a lot of the time with the jump cuts, it's just, well, there's not, you know, you're not really missing much, and it's 20, 30, 40 seconds, maybe a minute at most. But if there's something otherwise going on, then yeah, I tend to want to do this instead. So he's getting a couple of shots off at these defending enemy ships, and although their team does have more points, and they do seem to be in the position of putting more pressure on the enemy team, they're not that far apart in ships, and so this is not like a guaranteed win at this point. So now the carrier is giving Foo some attention, and that, you know, wouldn't exactly have killed him, but still, that was nice to not take the damage all the same. He does have a catapult fighter, but I don't think it's, no, it's just towards the end of its cooldown, so he'll have it available again soon. But as you can see, he's got Hydro rather than defensive on this. And it's, in a way, the safe choice on the Graf Spee, because it's German Hydro. It's very, very useful. But the Graf Spee, if you go for a full AA spec, and it does mean sacrificing something in terms of your main gun accuracy, but if you go for that full AA spec, especially with manual AA, this becomes an unexpectedly good ship. Now, it's nowhere near the level of the Cleveland or, say, the Queen Elizabeth with the same kind of setup. But sometimes, you know, that in of itself is an advantage because people don't expect it to be good at AA. And maybe saying it's good at in, you know, with an AA setup is a bit of an overstatement, but it, with defensive AA, can actually put out a pretty respectable amount of DPS with manual AA involved. So, you know, carrier players generally are going to be avoiding ships they know have good AA. They're not going to be lingering their planes around in the AA aura of a Cleveland or a New Mex or you know, a Queen Elizabeth. Although I think still people less know about the Queen Elizabeth being a good AA ship. But this, it really isn't something carrier players expect to have a decent AA. So yeah, sometimes that value of being unexpected, even though it does require a very specialised setup, it can have that not shock factor, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, it can have the virtue of them falling into an ambush, and there's probably some much neater way of putting that my brain just cannot come up with right just now. So Anyway, yes, but that's not the case for Fu. That's just me pointing out that, you know, you can do that with the Grash Bay. I think that's actually a fairly legitimate setup, especially as you do, at least on the EU server, see carriers at tier 5 and tier 6 relatively often, and sometimes even double carrier games. And if you can get them to within, what is it, I think 5.4 is the best you can get, which is not bad for the tier, and hit the, you know, control click the planes, hit the defensive AA, and suddenly, you know, you've got 15, 16, 24 plane kills, and suddenly the enemy carriers not, you know, not doing so well as they might have been otherwise. Now this time he can't quite dodge and takes one. Doesn't flood though, but he had his damage control available anyway. He's also had a little bit of attention from some other ships there, but his remaining teammates are now all pulled up just to the south of the cap, with the Bayern probably taking the brunt of it. So Fu can basically concentrate on knocking out this Bogue, and it's a bit damage farmy, but it's also taking out an enemy player and getting their team points, and making sure that, you know, I mean, the Bogue's not then going for any of his allies while Fu is doing this. Obviously the Bogue's going to be concentrating on him, and this Bogue still has some planes left, so this Bogue is still a threat. This isn't just damage farming, although you could, as I say, see it that way. So if he gets some citadels, he should be able to rack up the damage rather quickly. But it's all rather dependent on RNGs, of course. But it's not like the Bogue has a lot of armor, so as long as nobody takes the opportunity to shoot at him while he's otherwise engaged, this is a nice bit of extra damage and a useful kill. And this Bogue is never going to get away. The Grash Bay is not a fast ship. It does, what, 28 point something knots? I think you can get it to over 29 if you're using the Sierra Mike flag. But it's fast enough to keep up with the Bogue. It really is not a particularly fast ship at all. So I think that's the Bartan that's also firing at him, but thus far it's Fu that's gotten the majority of this damage, and he's now up to... Oh, there we go, there's a Citadel, another one of those, and that'll be the kill maybe. That's brought him up to even just over 100,000 damage done, which is not half bad for a Grash Bay, especially as he hasn't used the torpedoes. Because this is one of the strengths of this ship, it has very good torp drop angles. And I have had, not lots of games, but some games where you get yourself into a position near to the end of a match, there's maybe only a couple of enemies left, and you're winning at that point, and you can just go up to people, dodge the shells that are incoming, hopefully, and use those good torp drop angles, and the 8-kilometer range of the torps as well. This ship has the best ranged torps of any German cruiser. It makes for sometimes a very, very useful close range method of doing damage. So only 2 ships left on the enemy team now, a Cleveland and what is that, another Bayern? Yes. And the Cleveland is giving him a bit of attention, which he doesn't really want because he doesn't have a lot of hit points left. The allies that he has left, well, it's the Arizona and that Emil Bartan. They are getting quite close to this on time, and even if he didn't have the planes spotting him, I think he'd still be surface spotted by the Cleveland at the moment. So it's just coming down to who's going to win the RNG fight and how well he can dodge the Cleveland's shells, because of course they're not particularly fast shells, but his own shells aren't particularly accurate in return, so the Cleveland's rate of fire might well win out. It's not just him though, this Bartan is also having a go, but the Bartan is only about half health themselves, so it's not a bad fight for the Cleveland as long as he doesn't sail around broadside and manage to get citadeled by these guns, which can happen. You know, the Cleveland does have pretty troll armor as it is. Even broadside, sometimes you're not going to get the kind of reliability of damage that you would with other ships. But even, you know, just not getting the citadels or lots of full pens, he's still doing a bit of damage. But this is where the frustration with this ship can come in. You can end up getting lots of like just overpens, misses, whatever, and it can feel a bit all too familiar to anybody that's ever played any of the German battleships. So the Bartat is now taking the brunt of that Cleveland's attention. Fu was actually able to stealth up a bit, but he's opened fire again. There's a good chance of maybe killing this Cleveland soon, except there's only like 12 seconds left at this point. So it looks like both of them are going to live, although sadly the Emil Bartat did not. But that was not enough to bring the points back in the enemy team's favour. So a very close match. Over 100k damage done is pretty good in a Graf Spee, and as you can see, he actually got some medals there as well. A Dreadnought and a Confederate, 120k damage done almost. So yeah, very, very good indeed. This, if you're wondering, by the way, this is exactly the same as the regular Graf Spee. It's basically just a different skin, and it does get a voiced captain for it as well, but in all other regards it is the same. So there we go, almost 2000 base XP, not far off. He actually had the most plane kills of anybody on his team. So even without having an AA setup or an AA spec captain, the AA is still not terrible, but it was only a tier 5 carrier. And yeah, it was just, you know, a good match for showing that with a bit of patience and with a lot of dodging, this ship can actually do reasonably well for itself, but it does require some patience, and it does require working around those guns a bit. But the fact that it has that heal is, you know, that's going to just keep it in a fight so much longer than most other tier 6 cruisers. So I've jumped up a tier. It's more Germans, this time the Gneisenau, as driven by Gade 2000 here. And this time it's some rather nice matchmaking, top tier matchmaking in fact. So yeah, it's a domination game this time, as you can see. And this is quite a nice environment for this ship. Some people really don't like this. I know some people don't like the Graf Spee. That definitely goes for the Gneisenau as well, because it's only got 6 guns, it's got that German battleship accuracy, and although it has got a reasonably speedy rate of fire, it's not, of course, as fast as the Scharnhorst. So, yeah, just the unreliability of these guns and the fact you've only got 6 barrels, I can see why people don't like it, but at the same time, I really quite do. It has a lot of other strengths. It's got that German turtleback armor, and this is the transition from tier 6, where you basically have the World War I ships, to tier 7, where it's the World War II ships. You've also got a lot of speed to work with. You've got the best AA at tier 7 outside of like the Atlanta and the Flint, pretty much. An AA spec Gneisenau is a monster. You put manual AA on this ship, you've got AFT, you've got BFT, and I think you control click a plane. Obviously you don't have defensive AA, but you're talking well over 300 DPS. It's, you know, that's just the outer envelope. it's really a ship that if you spec it for AA, carriers are not going to want to go near, even higher tier carriers. So, you know, it's got that going for it. It has secondaries. You can spec fully into secondaries instead, and there's still a bit of crossover with the AA, of course. But it's also reasonably strong in that area. It's the only regular battleship that has torpedoes, so there's that. And it's just a really good brawler all round because of that tankiness, that toughness, the secondaries, and the ability to just take a beating, get in there and drop torpedoes in somebody's face. You know, that will sometimes be hilarious if you can get away with it. But of course that can also lead to overconfidence and getting yourself into situations where you just then are doomed because you've bitten off more than you can chew. But for now, Gade is playing it somewhat cautiously, just until he knows where the enemy team is, which is kind of what you want to do in any ship at the start of pretty much any game, apart from maybe destroyers where you're trying to contest cap circles. You just want to know where the enemy forces are. And I'm sure Sun Tzu had some, very wise thing to say about knowing the disposition of your enemy. But in this case, it looks like they are mostly on the other side. There's a couple of ships here, and they've already disposed of, 2 cruisers. But apart from the Koenig and the Algerie, it doesn't really look like there's anything else. So, I mean, he could keep being ultra cautious and hang around at the back and keep firing away with these 15-inch guns and hoping RNG isn't too cruel, but that would be the wrong call for this kind of situation. When there's so few enemy ships here, when they outnumber them so heavily, you want to get in there, you want to smash them as quickly as possible, and then you want to get to some other point on the map to help out your own team, because over on the other flank, well, they've basically lost all the ships that they've lost over there pretty much, and there's a Pensacola and a Cleveland madly trying to make a getaway, but I can tell you now they're not going to make it. So the Algerie, he does have to watch out for torps, of course, but half the trick is knowing that somebody has torps and that somebody's going to make the drop. And so unless somebody is dropping at close to point blank range, generally speaking, you will have enough time to dodge. And in this case, yeah, there we go, easily turned away from the Algerie's drop. So that just leaves the Koenig, who is trying to make a getaway, but it's not a fast ship particularly, so yeah, they can possibly get some more damage out of this, but with alongside himself 3 cruisers and a new mechs also all firing at him, it's unlikely he'll get huge amounts of damage out of just this one ship. And he probably realises this, so it's about now that he's turning eastwards to try and get a bit closer to the rest of the enemy team, because about half the enemy team is still alive, and it's roughly the same for his own team. They've got 1 more ship alive at the moment. Both teams have lost all their destroyers at this point, so and this was a game also where the matchmaker had not managed to find equal numbers of destroyers. This is a 6.4 game, by the way, so this is going back to, gosh, when would this be? Let's actually take a look. Oh no, it doesn't actually have the date and time on the replay file, because sometimes people rename them. So anyway, never mind. I don't know when this was from exactly, but 6.4 is, like last year sometime or longer. I can't remember exactly. We're going back a little ways, is what I'm trying to get at. And it basically has been a problem ever since, and it's still a problem, and Wargaming knows it's a problem. And I've done videos specifically on the subject about it being a problem. And it's not, of course, just destroyers. It's also things like radar ships that can be an issue as well. But destroyers in domination games, it's particularly a problem. So, 2 caps apiece. They have a points lead, they have a slight ships lead still, and the remainder of the enemy team seems to have split a bit. So we've got 3 ships here with the Colorado heading away, and then 2 ships much further over towards the sea cap where we haven't seen them in a while. So first order of business, this Fiji that's just smoked up. 2 overpens, unfortunately, nothing spectacular, but with all of his allies here, I mean, pushing in around this way. And again, he knows there might be torps incoming, so one thing you can do to help, of course, is put a spotter plane up, but just knowing that there might be is, and taking evasive maneuvers is, always what you should be doing, regardless of what ship you are in. And yeah, he can't afford to sit around at the back, is what I'm going for. And so he's actually pushing forwards a bit. But yeah, not going in a straight line here. He's varying his course, varying his speed a little bit. He's not making it easy for anyone that does want to drop torps on it. So Myoko is just about done. The Fiji smoke will be dissipating fairly soon, and of course we can tell the Fiji is still in their smoke because they're still firing from it, but they've just lost their eyes pretty much. The Colorado is the only thing that's sort of nearby enough to spot for this Fiji. Although he's now himself surface spotted by probably the Fuso over in sea, or it might well be the Colorado. Although there's an island and smoke in between, so I'm guessing it is the Fuso that saw him. So if he's lucky, this should be all of the citadels, because it's a Fiji, and he's got plenty of health here, so even if he did take a stray torpedo, unless he gets just straight up detonated, it's probably not going to be that big a deal. But no, RHG is kind of letting him down a little bit. You know, this has been one of those games where you can see to some extent why people don't like this ship. He's just not had that much luck with big strikes ever. He's had lots of overpens though. And you know what, this guy's close enough, there it is, that he could get the close quarters, and he does. So they have taken the enemy team down now to 3 ships, but they're only at 4 themselves, and one of those, the Cleveland, is rather a ways away. So if he can take down this Colorado, and the Colorado is not an opponent to be taken lightly. If he can take down this Colorado, at that point, that's probably the biggest remaining enemy threat left. Because the Fuso, I mean, the Fuso is a good ship, but it's not a particularly durable ship, all things considered. And then there's the Pensacola, and the Pensacola is definitely not a durable ship. So a bit of a secondaries duel going on. He's giving this guy quite a lot of broadside. Hopefully it won't hurt. There we go. Gets the torpedo kill and doesn't take any tremendously significant amount of damage. It maybe would have been better. You know, I would have kept turning in towards. I would have kept the angle. Although, of course, Tier 7 battleship versus those 16-inch guns, his bow could be overmatched potentially. But still, giving broadside like that is making things a bit too easy. Now, you might have noticed he could heal, and I'm not quite sure why he isn't. But never mind. But, you know, surely it's not going to be that big of a deal, though. It is only a Fuso. Only. And against the 14-inch guns, well, the best the Fuso can hope for in this kind of engagement is superstructure pens, essentially, unless Gade gives a lot of broadside. But, you know, that would maybe be a bit... That would be giving away your advantage. That would maybe be a bit foolish. And the only real reason one would have to give a lot of broadside would be if one were to try and make a torpedo drop, for instance. Yeah, also Gade, I don't know if you noticed this, but you have a heal available. You do have a heal. Was he trying to go for some kind of no-heal challenge? I couldn't tell you. But this Fuso, and this Fuso's firing HE, with the fires, with the HE damage, they're actually starting to rack up the damage. And so, although going into this fight, Gade hit a pretty decent amount of health, it's not really looking like it now, and he's only just using a heal. So this is, you know, he's considerably upped his damage since the last time I mentioned damage. We're now approaching 140,000, but he's also going to be in serious danger of losing his ship very, very soon. And there goes the torps. They look like they'll hit, but Fuso's final AP volley kills him. And he does get the Fuso in return and gets the Flesh Wound award. And that, you know, really puts him a lot closer to winning, because now it's just the Pensacola left. But dying felt a bit unnecessary there. I don't think he needed to. He didn't use a heal until it was way too late. And he was also... I mean, he got away with giving broadside against that Colorado, and it was not a good move especially. But he then, I think, against the Fuso, got maybe a little bit complacent, didn't realise he had the heal available, and so... Even though 150,000 damage done, very good result, bunch of awards there. He could have played better. He certainly could have played better. Definitely didn't need to end that battle having sunk. But still, that was a good result. 2,097 base XP, over 150k damage done, easily top of his team. Although the Miyoko did quite respectably well as well. And... yeah, it shows some of what this ship is good at. It's a very good close quarters, in-your-face kind of ship. But you still have to pay some due respect to other ships, because, you know, you can still get hurt. You're still not invulnerable when you're playing this thing. So for the final replay, we're going to have another premium ship and actually another HSF ship, and the only other HSF ship, the Harikaze. Well, having said that, of course, I mean, you know, you could make an argument that you can have an HSF version of the Musashi and the Yamato if you have the appropriate camos, but they're not, you know, listed in the game specifically as being those ships. So you'd be kind of nitpicking at that point. But hey, this is the internet, and if people don't nitpick on the internet, then what is it even for, apart from, well, cat pictures and probably other kinds of pictures as well. I haven't investigated too deeply. So, yeah, this is, I've lost my train of thought now, Zebedee. This is Zebedee. He's in a division with Pricey Gaming. They're both in their Tier 8 premiums, with Pricey in this case being the Alabama. And the Harikaze itself, I can't tell you too much about, other than just the bits and pieces that I've picked up from, you know, looking at the wiki and looking at other people's replays and hearing other people talk about it. It is an interesting ship in that it has 3 different possible setups. You can have a standard 127mm gunned setup, so that would make it basically, in terms of firepower, just like a regular Japanese destroyer. I think it's the Kagero's guns specifically it gets. You can have the Akizuki guns, the 100mm guns, which is what Zebedee has here. And then you have the option of American 5-inch guns, 3 of them, and they're not even quite regular destroyer guns. I think they're actually the same 5-inch secondaries that is it the Midway gets? Something like that. You don't see people using that option very often, though. You're much more likely to see people using the high rate of fire Akizuki guns. That does, however, mean that you need like a specific captain for this ship, because these are only 100mm guns. You need IFHE to even pen the superstructure on most of the ships you're going to meet. The AP is very, very effective against other destroyers, and I think if you get like a light cruiser, say a Soviet cruiser showing you broadside, the AP would probably be fairly devastating there as well. But in this case, you know, that's not any of those things. That's a Fuso, and it's only a Tier 6 battleship, but it's still a battleship. So if he wants to get consistent damage, he needs to hit the superstructure. But as you can see, actually what he's trying to do instead is set fires. And you can see there just quite how many shatters he's getting on everything but the superstructure. So even with IFHE, he's basically not going to be doing anything other than setting the fires. But because you've got such a high rate of fire, your chances of, you know, you can just pump out enough shells that even if the individual shell chance, the individual fire chance isn't that high, coupled with the rate of fire, it becomes actually quite effective if you get the chance to sit and do this. So this Fuso is in all kinds of trouble. Doesn't really, like, they're not trying to back away. I mean, even trying to maneuver towards his allies at this point would be risky, because it's not like Zebedee's alone here. He's got Pricey behind him. There's an allied Fuso, there's a New Orleans, there's a Colorado a bit further back. So, I mean, I think this Fuso is just kind of screwed either way, but to some extent he's just sitting there and taking it. He is firing his guns back, but yeah, this guy's not going to last very long. So there goes some more torpedoes. He's obviously running with smoke rather than the torp reload booster, and that's, you know, again, you'll probably see most people running with smoke. The torp reload booster can very occasionally be extremely useful, but most of the time having smoke is more useful. So he actually hit an enemy destroyer somewhere in that smoke, so that's nice. Killed the Fuso with the torpedo hit, and oh, there we go, there's the Shenyang. But it seems like it was the Fuso's final salvo that took a good 5k chunk of his hit points there, so that part wasn't so nice. And although this is definitely risky, opening fire like this, trying to knock out a low health destroyer, sometimes it can be worth the risk. And I think he's just banking on having enough allies around him that he won't be getting targeted by all of the, you know, things that are here. And as it is, you know, the Shenyang is still firing at him, but if the Nagato and the Amagi were firing at him at the same time, that would be really very unpleasant indeed. So it's actually Pricey's secondaries that get the kill there. And as the Amagi is ignoring him, as the Nagato is ignoring him, he just decides to smoke up and commence plinking away with these 100mm guns again. And, well, hopefully he'll get some more fires. The cadence on me saying 100mm was a bit weird there. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway. The perils of recording. This is actually, like I recorded the first bit of this video in one go and then took a little break to have a drink of water. As one does, because, you know, talking for like 45 minutes straight is not the easiest thing in the world, but I then had to restart this because the power blipped and my UPS started beeping away in the background, which was a little bit annoying and distracting, so yes. Anyway, so where was I? He's shooting at stuff! There you go. I could just say that and that would be my whole thing. For my whole commentary for the replay is just, he's shooting at stuff! Yeah, it'd be a bit low effort though. There was actually a comment the other day, and this is me just, you know, complete aside, but he's in smoke, he's shooting at stuff, you know, we've established this. There was a comment from somebody, and it was under a stream highlight video, that I, like, talk too much. And I was slightly baffled, because surely that's the point of watching videos with commentary and watching streams, is people are, you know, interacting and talking and generally not just sitting there silently playing a game. There's plenty of channels on YouTube that just show, like, game replays, warships and tanks replays, but this is not one of them. So he actually gets Citadel, not a Citadel, detonation rather, on the Nagato, and that, I mean, you know, there was a smoke cloud really close by. Nagato didn't really have much of an excuse there. He also had some flooding on the Amagi. He caught the Amagi with just one torque, but clearly it was between the cooldown for his damage control party. So he's now sitting pretty at 121k damage and 2 battleship kills. Not bad. Pricey has also got 2 kills. So between them, they've done a pretty good job at this end of the map, and they've presumably had some help from the other ships that are here as well. The other end of the map, however, has not been going nearly so well. Most of the enemy team is there, which is actually good for them. It's actually, well, good for Sebidi's team, is what I mean by that. Because it means that there's a very good chance of taking and holding the middle, and if they can keep the enemy team bottled up at the sea cap, then they can turn this around, because this is pretty close at the moment, both in terms of score and ships. So really, they have no reason not to push the B cap right now with what the enemy team's doing. They may well lose this Molotov, who's not in the best position, but I mean, the Atago is doomed, and Seb might even get the kill, maybe, although there's lots of other things shooting at him. Oh, there we go, he does get the kill. So, although this maybe was not the, like, was possibly a bit of a wasted smoke, you can understand him playing it a bit cautiously. So we know the remaining enemy destroyer is here. The Molotov did indeed die, and of what's left of the enemy team, yeah, some of them are still in sea, some of them are now pushing down around south, and Pricey is at the moment engaging Gneisenau and an enemy, that's a word, an enemy Alabama, and he's backed up by their Colorado. Not so much the Fuso though, I don't think the Fuso really has an angle on either of those things. So this is where this rate of fire becomes a bit wicked. He's managed to take some health out of that Kagero, but the New Orleans was obviously helping there as well. So between the two of them, they demolished that guy pretty quick. And because it was a New Orleans, well, why would you drop smoke in a Kagero in that situation? You would just not want to get into that situation in the first place. But they were, so they were kind of a bit screwed either way, quite possibly. But slowing down and sitting in smoke was still just about the worst possible thing. So that's the B cap taken. They are a little behind on points now, but of the enemy team, well, I've both jump cut and had a sped up section here because it was about a minute of him getting to the position of rounding that southern tip. As you can see, they took out the Gunneyes now, and the Alabama's retreated, and everything else is... well, a couple of the cruisers are now pushing back onto B, but Pricey's back up that way as well, so they're defending rather nicely. As there is an Indianapolis there, though, Zebedee has to be a little cautious, because that thing does have a good radar range. It's, what, 9.9 kilometers? So, yeah, but... Still, if he wants to do some damage, you know, no risk, no reward. So this Alabama's looking awfully nice, and even better, this Alabama is ignoring him. So there was maybe a slight moment where he was thinking, "Oh no, the guy's going to bring his guns around," but as it was, no, the Alabama was firing across, possibly at Pricey. I didn't even see who killed Pricey, but anyway, Pricey's now dead, and. Although the Alabama's now taken notice, he's now manoeuvring a bit and trying some line fire. And there we go. There's the Indianapolis radar. Ooh, yeah, he'd better get moving. In fact, I'd use a speed boost at this point, and there it is. It still looks like he might get some torp hits. Yep, there we go. Puts one into the bow and actually has, I think, caused another flooding because the Alabama put some of those fires out. So... even though he's taking a bit of a battering himself now, his damage score is just going up and up and up. And the more he's weakening these remaining two ships, of course. I mean, they're going to win this one on points. They're getting there on time anyway, but it makes it that much easier for his allies to actually finish off these ships. So he's got a fire going himself, but it won't be enough to kill him. He's got another fire going on the Alabama, just pummeling away, trying to get in this last bit of damage. And there's another fire. He might even get the Alabama kill, which would be quite nice. Not enough to get him the Kraken, though. Pricey got 4 kills. And if he was to somehow kill the Alabama and get the Indianapolis at the same time, then he'd have the Kraken. But as it is, it's actually the New Orleans that gets the Alabama kill. So that's pretty much that for this game. There is still the Indianapolis to finish off, but yeah, that's not going to be too difficult. It's not particularly a tough ship. Heck, the Indianapolis might even get to live. We're nearly at 1,000 points, and it actually looks like that's what might happen. There we go. 181k damage though. That's not half bad. And it was quite well spread out between the actual direct gunfire, the fires set, the torpedo hits, and the flooding and the fires, and all of it added up to being a pretty nice total. So a nice 1-2 scoreboard place there. 2400k for Zebedee, very respectable 1700 for Pricey, and yeah, there we go, there's the damage breakdown. So 36k just from the shells fired, 400 hits though. Yeah, these 100mm guns, yeah, 55k from the torps and 90k combined from the fire and the flooding. So it was just a nice combination of everything, and he was able to make that into a really, you know, a really profitable, really good XP game in the end, because of course, this being a premium, you can just put any Japanese captain into it, although you'd probably want one that was specialized for this ship, just based on the knowledge I have of it. So there we are, a bit of a bumper edition. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. I know it's not been the smoothest video verbally ever. I mean, I know that's not something I'm famous for anyway, but yeah, as I said at the start, it's been a little bit of a rough weekend. So anyway, we're here now. I've managed to get a video done, and hopefully you were entertained by it. So if you have enjoyed this video, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.